Fox News alert, the Supreme Court has ended affirmative action. Universities can no longer accept or deny college applications based on race. But there's a loophole, and we'll have more on that in a few minutes. Affirmative action started in the 70s. The idea, good intentioned, make it easier for minorities to get accepted into good schools. But while it got easier for blacks and Latinos, it became harder for Asians and whites. At Harvard, a black applicant, the cream of the crop, had 56% chance to get accepted, while whites and Asians with the same qualifications had just about a 15% chance. A black applicant who's at the bottom half of his chart had a higher chance to get in than a top Asian or white student. And the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that's unconstitutional racial discrimination prohibited by the Equal Protection Clause, the 14th Amendment. Chief Justice John Roberts, who authored the majority, says this, quote, eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it. The guarantee of equal protection cannot mean one thing when applied to one individual and something else when applied to a person of another color. Roberts is saying, basically, you can't unfairly discriminate against whites in order to help blacks. All discrimination's wrong. Harvard University made race a factor in every single step of the application process. From the second they accepted the application to the second they accepted or rejected it, race was used in their decisions. The court says Harvard's admission process relies on a stereotype that, quote, a black student can usually bring something that a white person cannot offer. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote this. The court sees the university's policies for what they are, rudderless, race-based preferences designed to ensure a particular racial mix in their entering classes. Those policies fly in the face of our colorblind Constitution and our nation's equality ideal. The court found that Harvard, for the last decade, created the same exact racial mix of every single freshman class. So how did these Harvard officials decide that this was going to be the racial mix of every single Harvard freshman class year after year after year? Well, it wasn't based solely on merit. So if Harvard is deciding the perfect racial pie chart year after year, and it doesn't even reflect the demographics of the country, someone's being racially discriminated against, and that's unconstitutional. The court says schools can still consider financial background, but can't assume a black applicant is poor just because they're black. Clarence Thomas writing again this, quote, individuals are the sum of their unique experiences, challenges, and accomplishments. What matters is not the barriers they face, but how they choose to confront them. And their race is not the blame for everything, good or bad, that happens in their lives. A contrary, myopic worldview based on individual skin color to the total exclusion of their personal choices is nothing short of racial determinism. Race does not determine your value and your success in life. We're all born with free will, and we can decide how we live our lives. Black people aren't poor because they're black. There's poor black people and there's poor white people, poor Asians and poor Hispanics. It's not the job of the judicial system to slow certain people down and speed others up. Some people are born with fathers who went to Harvard. Some people are born on third base. And some people are born with nothing and work their tail off and become billionaires. An administrator in Cambridge, Massachusetts, isn't God. And the country agrees. Around 70% of the country says race should not be a factor in college admissions. But if you turn the channel, it was Armageddon.
Is this leading to no women in colleges soon? Who knows?
We will begin to see a kind of segregated higher education landscape.
This is tantamount to sticking a dagger in our back.
The group that has been most successful in accessing diversity initiatives are white women.
And President Joe Biden agrees.
President Biden, the Congressional Black Caucus said the Supreme Court has thrown into question its own legitimacy. Is this a rogue court?
This is not a normal court.
You said this court is not normal. What did you mean?
What I meant by that is it's done more to unravel basic rights and basic decisions than any court in recent history. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. It's a very exciting day around here. We'll have reaction.
I don't know where the president left, but that's what he does. Primetime acknowledges that many black Americans are heartbroken by this decision. We understand that. Many black Americans acknowledge that they never would have achieved a certain level of success if it hadn't been for affirmative action. They own the fact that they were admitted because they were black, and maybe they didn't have the perfect application. And I'm sympathetic to that. I get it. But a white person who's more qualified was discriminated against and didn't get in. And when you discriminate on race, some people win and some people lose. Do you want to discriminate against someone because of something they can't control? Because of the way they were born? And there's a big stigma when it comes to affirmative action. You can be the most qualified black guy out there who got into Harvard on merit and then got a great job out of school, but in the back of your head, you think, is this because of the color of my skin? Michelle Obama herself said that question nagged her. And then there are people like Clarence Thomas, not a fan of affirmative action, who were told on national TV that the only reason you're on the court is because you're black.
Clarence Thomas, he has criticized affirmative action. That's one of the reasons why he graduated from Yale, and we know that's one of the reasons why he's on the Supreme Court.
Okay. Clarence Thomas is the black face of white supremacy and the poster child for affirmative action? Come on. This ruling's big and looks airtight, but there's wiggle room for race to play a role.
The court says, quote, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an application's discussion of how race has affected his or her life, but be it through discrimination or inspiration or otherwise, end of quote.
So the schools can't put in writing that they discriminate based on race, but if an applicant writes their college essay about their experience as a black American or their experience being discriminated because of race, that'll probably help their chances, in all honesty. And Harvard's aware of the college essay wiggle room thing, so racial discrimination in practice will probably still exist. It'll probably take a few more lawsuits to be completely extinguished. And Biden's working all the angles.
Today, I'm directing the Department of Education to analyze what practices help build a more inclusive and diverse student bodies and what practices hold that back.
Primetime has no problem with diversity. We like diversity, but unfair discrimination to achieve a random level of diversity is unconstitutional. And Biden needs to watch his step. The court saw this coming. Chief Justice Roberts writes, quote, universities may not simply establish through application essays or other means the regime we hold unlawful today. What cannot be done directly cannot be done indirectly. So the affirmative action battle isn't over, and the courts are watching for unconstitutional workarounds. Politically, the last major Supreme Court decision on abortion helped the Democrats in the midterms. So how will this Supreme Court decision on affirmative action play politically? Well, I asked Ron DeSantis about it earlier. Affirmative action, goodbye. Is that something that you think might have a big impact going forward?
Well, in Florida, we have race blind anyways, and we've done that in our state university. We're proud of that. We judge on merit. We're not going to try to divvy you up by your skin color. That is the absolute appropriate decision for the country, and we're going to be much better off. What the left wants to do, they want to de-emphasize what unites us and exacerbate the divisions, and that's not healthy for society. So your grades, your activities, all that, yeah, let's judge people on their merits.
Why do you think the left uses race as such a billy club against Republicans?
Well, I think that historically, the left would try to use class, but that doesn't work for them anymore because the blue collar folks are with us by and large. And so they got to figure out how can they divide. And so race and trying to exacerbate those is the obvious things. And in Florida, we don't do any of the woke nonsense. And yet, I've had more African Americans leading state agencies than any governor in the history of Florida. I've appointed 4 Hispanics to the Florida Supreme Court. I appointed the first Jamaican American, not because they checked those boxes, but because they rated the position. And that's how it should be.
And we'll show you the full interview in a few minutes. Now, remember, the court didn't strike down diversity. It struck down discrimination. The court merely said the Constitution doesn't allow racial quotas at admissions. The real issue is, why have African Americans not achieved, on average, comparatively, a higher level of academic success? Now, the answer isn't found in the court system. The public school system in this country is a disaster, especially for African Americans. And there should be a reckoning. Now, ultimately, the value of a good education is instilled by parents in the home. And obviously, poverty plays a role. But again, there's more poor whites than poor blacks in this country. So it's up to society as a whole to lift people up individually. And that can be done through the private sector, charities, through the government and churches. But there has to be a change in the heart and in the head. And we have to recognize that we're responsible for our own decisions. And life's the result of all of the decisions we've made. And America will figure it out. We always do it together.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.